Caldris IV was a frontier world, a vast, untamed expanse filled with the promise of fortune and the risk of peril. Darius Kane stood at the edge of the alien marketplace, his eyes scanning the crowd with a mix of wariness and curiosity. The marketplace buzzed with the sounds of trade. A symphony of haggling voices, clicking of translator devices, and the occasional hum of alien technology. It was a far cry from the life Darius had known back on Earth. Here, on this distant world, he was simply another trader, another survivor in the endless dance of commerce. Darius was not the type to linger in one place for long. His time was spent bartering supplies, seeking out odd jobs, and maintaining his small but well-equipped ship. His reputation preceded him, known for fairness in dealings and a relentless determination to get the job done. Still, he carried a quiet solitude, shaped by the ghosts of a past he rarely spoke of. It was amidst this marketplace that she appeared. Her form was striking. A slender, graceful alien woman with shimmering silver-blue skin that glowed softly under the twin suns. Her hair, a cascade of flowing silver strands, glimmered as she moved with purpose through the throng. Beside her, a towering creature stood, a horse-like being, large and majestic, with glowing eyes that seemed to pierce through the crowd. "Human," she called out, her voice smooth and melodic, yet tinged with desperation. Darius paused, his brow furrowing as he turned toward her. Her gaze was steady, pleading yet composed. She moved toward him with quiet determination. "I am Sirala of the Threlka," she said, her voice steady. "My husband was lost in the mines. The debt left behind threatens to take my only companion, Rayler, from me. I have come to ask for your help." Darius studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. He had dealt with desperate souls before, those who sought refuge in trade or temporary partnerships. But something about this woman struck a deeper chord, a quiet strength beneath her elegant exterior. "I don't take wives," Darius said bluntly, his tone firm yet not unkind. "I deal in supplies, not arrangements." Sirala's eyes remained locked on him, unwavering. "I ask not as a wife, but as a partner. Together, we can survive. Rayler will aid you in your travels, and I will ensure your safety and prosperity. In return, you will grant us passage through this harsh world." Darius exhaled slowly, his gaze drifting to the towering horse beside her. Rayler stood calm, watching him with intelligent eyes. The bond between Threlka and their mounts was well known, a partnership that could not be easily broken. "You ask much," Darius said, his voice softer now. "And what of your people? Are they not waiting for you?" "They have no place for a widow and a debt-ridden animal," Sirala replied quietly. "I seek a new path, a way to ensure survival, not just for myself, but for Rayler." Darius rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. The proposition was dangerous. The risks were clear. Trust was a fragile thing in the wilds of Caldris IV, but there was something compelling in her resolve, a determination that echoed his own struggles. "All right," he said finally. "You have 2 weeks. After that, we part ways." Sirala nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. "It is all I ask." As they made their way out of the marketplace, the tension between them began to shift. Darius glanced at her from time to time, seeing more than a desperate plea for survival. He saw a person who had faced loss and hardship, but who refused to surrender. And beside them, Rayler moved with a silent grace, offering a strange but undeniable sense of companionship. The journey ahead would be long and fraught with uncertainty, but for now, they would move forward, each with their own reasons for survival, finding strength in one another amidst the unknown. The sun set slowly over Caldris IV, casting a warm orange glow over the rugged landscape. Darius and Sirala moved through the uneven terrain, the shadows of the 2 suns stretching long across the ground. Rayler, their silent companion, walked gracefully beside them, his hooves making a rhythmic sound as they pressed into the rocky soil. Darius adjusted the straps of his pack, his mind drifting back to the conversation earlier that day. Sirala's plea had been clear. She needed a partner, someone to stand by her in a world that offered little mercy. The weight of her request hung in the air between them, a challenge neither could easily ignore. "What do you know about survival?" Darius asked after a long silence. His voice was steady, though his tone betrayed his curiosity. "This world isn't kind to those who don't know how to fight for every scrap." Sirala glanced at him, her silver blue eyes reflecting the fading light. "I was trained to endure. Threlka women are taught not only to lead, but to adapt. We survive not because of strength alone, but through unity. Rayler is more than a companion. He is family." Darius looked down at Rayler, who paused briefly, his glowing eyes fixated on his rider. There was a bond there, one forged in the harshest of circumstances. Darius had seen similar bonds before, but none like this. It was a partnership built on mutual need and trust, unlike anything he had experienced. "And what happens when things get rough?" Darius pressed. "When the dust clouds close in, and survival becomes a matter of seconds." Sirala didn't hesitate. "We fight, together." The simplicity of her answer lingered in the air. Darius knew well the struggles of isolation. He had tried to live apart from the world, driven by guilt and loss. But Sirala's offer wasn't one born of weakness. It was one of understanding. She saw potential where others saw only danger. "You're bold to come to a stranger," Darius finally said. "Why me?" "Because you are alone," Sirala replied, her voice steady. "You have no ties, no expectations. You need no convincing. You live in the wilds because you understand it. I don't seek a life of comfort. I seek a life where Rayler and I can exist without fear." Darius considered her words. They were simple, yet full of meaning. He had been running from attachment for years, running from a past that haunted him at every turn. But Sirala offered something different, not just survival, but the chance to fight for something more. 2 weeks, he said after a moment. "You've got 2 weeks to prove this isn't some pipe dream." Sirala smiled softly. "It will be enough." The days that followed were a test of patience and resilience. Darius showed Sirala the basics of navigating their harsh surroundings, how to conserve water, identify edible plants, and protect themselves from the elements. Rayler, with his keen senses and swift reflexes, became a cornerstone of their travels. Together, they made a formidable team. But not everything was smooth. There were clashes of culture, subtle misunderstandings, and moments of quiet reflection. Darius, accustomed to solitude, found himself adjusting to Sirala's presence, not just her physical presence, but the way she challenged his view of the world. "You don't always have to shoulder the weight alone," Sirala said one evening as they sat by a fire. Her voice was gentle, yet firm. "Your pain doesn't have to define you." Darius stared into the flames, the memory of past battles surfacing briefly before he pushed them away. "It's easier that way," he murmured. "Is it?" Sirala asked softly. "Sometimes the hardest thing is to let someone in." Darius didn't respond immediately. He knew the truth in her words but wasn't ready to face it. For years, he had built walls, strong, impenetrable walls, to protect himself from the vulnerability that came with attachment. Yet with Sirala, those walls began to feel thinner, less certain. As the days turned into nights, the bond between them grew stronger. Rayler, ever watchful, continued to guard them with unwavering loyalty. Darius, in turn, began to recognize the value of partnership, not just for survival, but for something deeper. They were two strangers in an alien world, forging a connection amidst the chaos. And with every passing mile, the line between necessity and companionship blurred ever so slightly. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, its rays piercing through the mist that still clung to the land. Darius adjusted his pack and glanced back at Sirala, who walked quietly beside him. Rayler moved effortlessly ahead, his hooves barely making a sound on the soft, uneven ground. The wastelands of Calder's IV were unforgiving. stretching endlessly with jagged rocks, twisted vegetation, and shifting sands. The air was thick with dust and the distant hum of unseen dangers. Yet despite the challenges, the trio pressed forward, bound together by necessity and mutual respect. "Do you ever miss your home?" Sirala asked quietly, breaking the silence between them. Darius thought for a moment before answering. "Home is a long way away. The past doesn't hold much for me anymore." Sirala nodded slowly. Her thoughts were her own, but the understanding in her eyes spoke volumes. They both carried burdens, his personal grief and her widowhood. Together, they navigated the harsh reality of survival, finding solace in the companionship they offered each other. Their journey was one of slow progress. Nights were spent under the open sky, with Rayler keeping watch as they slept. Darius taught Sirala how to stay alert and prepared for any threat, while she shared stories of her people, of Threlka traditions, resilience, and the deep bond they had with their mounts. "Rayler is more than just a protector," Sirala said one evening, her voice soft. "He is my family. We live as one, connected by mind and spirit." Darius listened quietly, his gaze fixed on the fire as the flames danced between them. He appreciated her honesty, though part of him still wrestled with the idea of such deep emotional ties. His own experiences had taught him that reliance on others could be dangerous. "We all need something to rely on," Darius said after a moment. "But there's a cost to that trust. Sometimes it's easier to stand alone." Sirala sat quietly for a moment before speaking. "Not always. Strength comes from unity, not isolation." The conversation hung between them, a gentle reminder that survival could mean more than just physical endurance. They were beginning to see that emotional strength could be a bridge, connecting them through shared understanding. As they continued their journey, the landscape began to shift. The sands grew more unstable, the winds more ferocious. Darius taught Sirala how to read the signs of the environment, how to recognize the subtle clues of shifting dunes and sudden storms. Rayler, with his keen senses, adapted with ease. One day, as they pressed through a particularly desolate stretch, a sudden gust of wind swept across the dunes, revealing a figure in the distance. Darius and Sirala stopped in their tracks, their eyes narrowing as they watched the lone traveler approach. "Another wanderer," Darius said, his voice low. The figure moved slowly, their silhouette outlined against the sun. As they drew closer, Darius could see the faint glimmer of metal armor and the distinctive insignia of a scavenger guild. "Stay close," Darius warned, gripping his weapon tightly. Scavengers were unpredictable and often dangerous. The traveler came to a halt a few feet away, raising a hand in greeting. "Traders," they said, their voice rough and metallic. "Passing through." "We are," Darius replied. "You?" "Seeking salvage," the scavenger replied, glancing at Sirala and Rayler. "That mount of yours is worth a fortune." Darius stepped protectively in front of Sirala, his eyes narrowing. "He's not for sale." The scavenger studied them for a moment before sighing. "Suit yourselves, but keep moving. The wastes aren't safe for long." With that, the figure turned and disappeared into the dunes, leaving them alone once again. Darius exhaled slowly, his grip loosening on the weapon. "We need to be more cautious," Darius said, his voice steady. "The scavengers won't give up easily." Sirala nodded. "We'll keep moving, but always watchful. Rayler will warn us." Their journey continued under the relentless sun, their bond growing stronger with each step forward. The challenges of the wastelands forced them to rely on one another, teaching them more than mere survival. Together, they began to form something greater, an understanding built not just on necessity, but on trust. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of deep purple and orange. The twin moons of Caldrus Ivy began to rise, casting a soft glow over the landscape. Darius Kane sat by the campfire, sharpening his blade, his expression calm but thoughtful. Sirala, wrapped in a simple cloak of woven Frelka fabric, sat quietly beside him. Rayler, their ever-watchful companion, stood nearby, his eyes scanning the surroundings. The journey had taken them deeper into the wilderness, beyond the safety of familiar routes. Each day brought new challenges, the terrain more treacherous, the winds more relentless. But the trio pressed on. For the first time in years, Darius felt the weight of responsibility settle on him. Not just for himself, but for Sirala and Rayler, who had become more than mere partners. They were family. Sirala broke the silence, her voice soft yet steady. "We should talk about our next steps." Darius glanced at her, his brow furrowing slightly. "What do you mean?" "We've survived the wastelands this far," she said. "But eventually, we'll need a place to settle, a place to call home." Darius nodded slowly. The idea had crossed his mind more than once, though it felt foreign. His life had been a journey of constant movement, never settling long enough to form roots. Yet, with Sirala and Rayler, the idea no longer felt out of reach. "I've lived in isolation for years," Darius admitted quietly. "A home means more than just a place to rest. It's commitment." Sirala met his gaze, her expression patient. "And that's not something you're ready for." "No," Darius said firmly. "Not yet. But there's something about this." He gestured toward Rayler, who nuzzled his side gently. "It feels different. It feels real." They sat in silence again, the crackling fire the only sound between them. Rayler shifted his weight, his form blending into the darkness as he rested. "The wastelands are unpredictable," Darius finally said after some time. "A permanent home might not be safe." "But it could be," Sirala replied. "We can build something. A sanctuary away from the dangers that follow us." Darius sighed, leaning back against a rock. "It's not that simple. There's always something. Scavengers, storms, raids. A home invites more risks." "Every path comes with risk," Sirala said gently. "But without a purpose, survival is hollow. We can fight through the dangers together. Rayler will always protect us." Darius remained quiet, watching the flames dance in the fire. He couldn't deny her conviction. There was strength in her words, but fear still lingered beneath his resolve. The next few days were filled with careful planning. Darius began teaching Sirala how to hunt beyond the simple foraging they had been doing. With Rayler's assistance, they tracked game through the rugged terrain, learning how to predict the behavior of the creatures that roamed the wastes. Sirala proved adept at setting traps and preparing meals, her Threlka traditions guiding her hand with precision. "We need more than just survival skills," Darius said one evening. "We need a purpose, something that sets us apart from mere travelers." Sirala nodded. "We can build a life here. A sanctuary, yes, but one where others can find refuge, where we teach them how to live, not just endure." The idea of teaching others was not unfamiliar to Darius. His time in the military had instilled discipline and leadership, though he had chosen to leave that life behind. Yet, Sirala's vision sparked something deeper, a chance to create something lasting. "You'd really take on others?" Darius asked, intrigued. "Yes," she said confidently. "Those who are lost, who seek hope. Together, we can protect them. We can show them how to thrive." Darius thought about it, his gaze drifting to the distant horizon. The thought of opening their home to strangers still made him uneasy, but the possibility of building something greater, a legacy, began to feel less daunting. "You're relentless," Darius said, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Only when it matters," Sirala replied with a smile of her own. Their journey continued, with new purpose driving them forward. Rayler, as always, moved alongside them with unwavering loyalty. Together, they faced the unpredictable dangers of Caldrus IV, knowing that each step brought them closer to something more than mere survival, a new life built on trust, strength, and hope. The sun hung high in the sky, its intense heat shimmering off the barren landscape of Caldrus IV. Darius, Sirala, and Rayler moved steadily across the rocky terrain, their silhouettes etched against the bright, unforgiving light. Each step they took brought them closer to their new goal, a place of refuge amidst the harsh wilderness. Darius glanced back at Sirala, who walked with purpose, her silver-blue skin reflecting the sunlight in a mesmerizing glow. Rayler, ever vigilant, kept pace beside her, his powerful form moving gracefully over uneven ground. The bond between them was strong, unbreakable, an unspoken understanding that extended beyond words. "Do you think it's still there?" Darius asked, his voice rough from days of travel. "Yes," Sirala replied confidently. "The caves are hidden, shielded by the rocks. No scavenger would dare venture into them without knowing the way." Darius nodded. The thought of safety, even temporary safety, was a welcome change. The wastelands had taken enough from them. Supplies, time, peace. A refuge would offer more than shelter. It would offer a chance to rebuild, to plan for the future. The trio pressed forward, their pace steady but cautious. The terrain became more rugged, the path narrow and winding through jagged cliffs and crumbling rock formations. The heat was relentless, and the air grew thick with dust. As they neared the base of a towering cliff, Sirala held up a hand, signaling for them to stop. "We're close," she said, her voice low. Darius examined the rocks carefully, scanning for any signs of the hidden entrance. After a few moments, his eyes locked onto a small, narrow crevice that blended seamlessly with the surrounding rock. "That's it," he said. Rayler moved forward first, his large frame squeezing through the gap with ease. Darius followed, then Sirala, guiding the way with a steady hand on her companion's side. The cave was cool and dark, a stark contrast to the oppressive heat of the surface. Inside, the air was damp and still, though the sounds of the outside world were muffled by stone walls. They emerged deeper into the cave system, finding a small, sheltered alcove, a safe haven away from the dangers that lurked above ground. Sirala sat down on a smooth rock, her breath slowing as she took in the relief of their temporary refuge. Darius leaned against the wall, his expression contemplative. "This will do," Darius said after a while. "For now." Sirala smiled softly. "It's not much, but it's ours for the time being. We can make it comfortable. Prepare it for when others join us." "Others?" Darius raised an eyebrow. "Yes," Sirala replied. "The ones who are lost, like we once were. They'll need a place to rest, to rebuild, a community where they can feel safe." Darius studied her, his expression neutral. "You're serious about this?" "I am," Sirala said, her voice steady. "Cauldrus IV is a dangerous place, but it doesn't have to be hopeless. Together, we can create a sanctuary, a refuge for those who seek it." Darius fell silent, his mind weighing her words. The idea wasn't entirely foreign. He had seen the power of unity during his time with the military. But building something lasting from the ground up was another challenge entirely. "We've survived by adapting," Darius said after a moment. "But people, they'd bring complications. You can't plan for everything." Sirala nodded slowly. "No, you can't. But you can prepare. The bond we share, the lessons we've learned. It's a foundation. We can build on that." Darius exhaled slowly, his gaze drifting to the dark entrance of the cave. It was a start, a step forward. And for the first time in years, the idea of a future, one where trust and community held more weight than solitude, felt less distant. "All right," Darius said finally. "We'll need supplies, tools, resources, and we'll need people who believe in what we're building." Sirala smiled warmly. "Together, we'll find them." Their days in the cave were spent preparing. Darius scouted the surrounding area for supplies, while Sirala worked on making their refuge more livable, clearing out debris, setting up makeshift furniture, and gathering small comforts from the limited resources available. Rayler continued his role as protector, his presence a constant reminder of the bond they shared. The harsh world of Cauldrus IV was still a threat, but their new refuge offered a glimmer of hope. And as they worked side by side, Darius felt the walls he had built over the years begin to crumble, little by little. Together, they were creating something more than just a sanctuary. They were building a future. Weeks passed as Darius, Sirala, and Rayler settled into their new refuge deep within the caves of Caldrus IV. The harsh wastelands had become familiar in their own way, but inside the cool, dark space, there was a sense of calm, a temporary reprieve from the dangers above. Darius moved methodically, ensuring the cave was fortified, its entrance hidden behind carefully stacked rocks and reinforced by layers of earth. Sirala, meanwhile, worked tirelessly to cultivate what little resources they had gathered, her hands weaving together makeshift baskets from vines and salvaged materials. Together, they built a life of sorts. "We're ready," Darius said one evening, inspecting the small defenses they had established. He turned to Sirala, who was seated by the fire, tending to a pot of bubbling stew. "If anyone comes, we'll be prepared." Sirala smiled softly, her silver blue eyes gleaming in the firelight. "Not everyone who comes will be a threat." Darius frowned slightly. "You're hopeful. Hope keeps us alive," she replied simply. "And trust, even when it's difficult, builds strength." Darius exhaled slowly, nodding his agreement. Trust had been his greatest challenge in the past, building it, sustaining it. Yet, with Sirala, things felt different. She wasn't just a partner. She was someone who understood the fragile balance between survival and community. The days of isolation were over, though the memories of his former solitude still lingered. Darius couldn't deny that there was comfort in the shared struggle. They weren't alone anymore, and that small realization had the power to transform them. One morning, while Darius sharpened his blade near the cave entrance, Rayler's ears flicked sharply, his gaze fixed on the distance. Darius followed his gaze, his senses immediately on alert. Moments later, footsteps echoed through the rocky terrain. "They're close," Darius said, gripping his weapon tightly. Sirala appeared beside him, her expression calm but alert. "More than one." "Yes," Darius said, his voice low. "And they're cautious." Rayler snorted softly, stepping forward to stand by his companions. The trio waited, the stillness of the cave broken only by the distant sound of approaching figures. Soon, a group of travelers emerged from the shifting sands. Their clothing was simple yet sturdy, with weapons strapped to their sides and expressions worn from travel. At the front of the group was a tall figure with a weathered face and piercing blue eyes. "I'm Darius," Darius said, stepping forward to meet them. "This is Sirala and Rayler." The leader nodded, his gaze moving between them. "I'm Callan. We've been seeking shelter." Word spreads quickly in the wastelands. "You've come to the right place," Darius said after a brief pause. "But this isn't a refuge meant for those who bring danger." "We understand," Callan said with a slight bow of his head. "We're travelers, not marauders. We seek only safety, not conflict." Darius studied Callan and his group carefully. There was no immediate threat, just weary travelers seeking rest. "You'll be welcomed here, but only if you're willing to contribute." Callan inclined his head again. "We'll help, whatever is needed." With that, the group was ushered into the cave, where they settled into the makeshift camp. The travelers were from various backgrounds, some former scavengers, others fleeing political persecution, and each had their own story of hardship. Yet, despite their differences, there was a sense of unity that began to form within the cave walls. "This is working," Sirala said quietly to Darius that evening. She watched as the newcomers worked together, sharing resources, setting up tents, and organizing tasks. "They're helping because they believe." "It's early," Darius replied cautiously. "Trust is earned." "And sometimes," Sirala said with a smile, "it's already there. You just have to let it grow." Days turned into weeks, and the refuge began to flourish. Together, the community gathered what they could from the wastelands, salvaging supplies, hunting for food, and learning how to thrive in the harsh environment. Darius took on the role of protector and guide, ensuring the safety of the growing group. Surala taught the newcomers practical skills, sharing her knowledge of Threlka survival techniques. Rayler continued his role as the vigilant guardian, his presence a comforting force in times of uncertainty. "We're more than survivors now," Darius said one evening as they gathered around a fire, voices low and filled with shared experiences. "We're building something that can withstand the wastelands." Surala smiled, her eyes shining with quiet pride. Together, they were stronger than they had been alone. And as they stood united beneath the twin moons of Caldrus IV, the refuge they had created stood as a testament to their resilience, a beacon of hope in a world that once offered none. The days turned into months, and the refuge within the caves of Caldrus IV became more than a temporary shelter. Darius, Surala, and the growing community had created something remarkable, a sanctuary in the heart of the wastelands. The once harsh, unforgiving world was beginning to feel like home. The bonds between them had deepened, and trust had become the foundation upon which they built their future. Darius stood at the cave entrance, surveying the area. Rayler grazed nearby, his keen eyes watching the landscape. Surala was inside, leading a group of younger members in the basics of crafting tools and maintaining their defenses. The once fragile group had become a well-organized community, self-reliant yet united. "Looks like we're stronger than we thought," Darius murmured to himself, a small smile tugging at his lips. Surala emerged from the cave with a group of apprentices, their hands stained with dirt and tools in hand. She gestured toward Darius with a nod. "We've taught them well," she said. "They're ready to take on more responsibilities." Darius nodded in approval. "We'll need them. The wastelands aren't forgiving." "We've adapted," Surala said with confidence, "and we'll continue to." As they spoke, Kalen approached with a small group of elders and scavengers, their faces weathered but steady. The older members had become advisors, their wisdom guiding the younger generations through the challenges of survival. Kalen nodded to Darius. "Your leadership has brought us this far, but it's not just about survival anymore. We need more than shelters. We need growth." Darius considered his words carefully. Growth had been the goal from the beginning, but in the back of his mind, a question lingered. What kind of future were they building? One of safety, yes, but also one of purpose. "We're creating something lasting," Darius said slowly. "But growth requires risk." Kalen gave a thoughtful smile. "It's a risk worth taking. The wastelands have changed us all, but they've also shown us what we're capable of." The conversation shifted toward long-term plans. They discussed how to expand their resources, planting crops in controlled environments, setting up trade routes with other isolated communities, and learning from past mistakes. Surala's insight into Threlka traditions and her knowledge of the land proved invaluable in these discussions. Darius, ever the strategist, listened carefully, weighing each suggestion with practical precision. "This is a community," Darius said at one point, "but it's also a place where we need to protect each other. We'll continue to build, but we must also defend what we've created." Surala nodded. "It won't be easy, but we've come this far. Together, we'll find a way." The community thrived, their days filled with purpose. Children played in the sheltered areas, their laughter echoing through the caves. Adults worked side by side, teaching, building, and sharing stories of survival. Even Rayler, who had once been an untamed force of the wild, had become more than a mount. He was family, a trusted protector, and a symbol of unity. One evening, as the twin moons rose, casting a silver glow over the landscape, Darius stood beside Surala near the fire. The warmth of the flame contrasted with the cool night air, but the sense of security was undeniable. "I never thought we'd come this far," Darius said, his voice quiet. "Neither did I," Surala replied with a gentle smile. "But here we are, and there's no turning back now." Darius glanced around at the community gathered around the fire, an eclectic group of survivors, united in purpose and hope. They had created something beyond survival. They had built a home, a refuge, and a future. Together, Darius said softly, "We've created more than just a sanctuary. We've created a legacy." Sirala's smile widened. A new dawn. As the fire crackled and the night deepened, the wastelands outside remained unchanged. But within those cave walls, something remarkable had begun, a journey toward growth, unity, and hope.